Alright, hi guys, so I've just finished repairing this Lanzar VIBE. This is the 3200DN. Now Lanzar people will know of because the Lanzar Opti range used to be very good. These days it's a little bit cheap, it's a little bit cheap and nasty. The Lanzar stuff from what I've seen does make its rated power, but the build quality is horrifically terrible and the board designs are all very old. So if you want to buy one really cheap, then by all means buy one and just do some improvements for the build quality, make it less susceptible to vibration damage, and you have a pretty good amplifier. But the Lanzar VIBE stuff is dubbed as being really cheapy, crappy piece of rubbish amplifier that doesn't make anywhere near rated power. This thing says 3200, so most people are like, yeah, it's gonna barely make 300 watts. So I've just finished this repair, so I'm curious to see how much power this thing actually makes. I think you can pick this up for very cheap, even brand new. So if it does any sort of half decent power, then it's not going to be a bad buy. And because I've repaired this, I know the amplifier's internals, I know what the circuit looks like, I know what components it's using, and I'll show you those after the repair. But I just wanted to do a bench test first to see what sort of power we're getting out of this thing. So let's turn on to my scope camera here, which is this one. And without further ado, let's power her up and let's get some audio going through this to see what she does. Alright, green light on the amplifier. So let's go ahead now and put some audio through. That's our clip point there we just saw. So I'm going to let it clip about here. Yeah. I would say it's about between 3 and 5% THD, and this is driving into a 1 ohm load. Alright, so now let's go ahead to our calculators. Now what was the voltage drop? I didn't check the voltage drop. .83 volts. Alright. So we need to do some stuff and have a look to see what that did. Okay, so if we go to Chrome now. So I'm just going to do this to show you guys. I can usually do this in my head, but I just want to show you the method. So on the scope there we saw 44.79 volts RMS, and that is the sine wave. That's the voltage of the sine wave that this amplifier just did. And that was into a static 1 ohm load. So we don't need a clamp meter, we don't need an ammeter, because we know our ohm load is static. It's always dead on 1 ohm because it's not a voice coil. So at 11.83 volts, this thing just did, woohoo, 2006 watts RMS. That's pretty impressive considering the voltage drop on that, and we weren't clipping it too badly. The clip was only a tad on here, really. Like, that's very usable. Yeah, you could definitely crank it up a lot more and get more power out of it, albeit slightly clipped, but that's not too sad at all. Now I'm going to correct it for 14.4 volts. So to correct it for 14.4 volts, I'm just going to type it in here because OBS doesn't screen capture my can I type letters and stuff in here? Yeah, I can. Right, so to work it out for 14.4 volts, we need to take 14.4, which is our desired tested voltage. We need to divide that by 11.83, which is what we saw. Jesus. Alright, divide it by 11.8. The divide button doesn't work in this field. Okay, so divide it by 11.3, and I'm just going to do that on the calculator real quick, because the calculator doesn't show up on screen capture on OBS. 14.4 divided by 11.83 equals, that gives us 1.21 and a bunch of numbers. We square that result to give us 1.48. Now 1.48 is now our correction factor. So our correction factor is 1.48, etc. So we need to times the power that we read by that 1.48. So we times 2006 times by 1.48 equals 2968 watts RMS. Which, okay, it's a little shy of its rated power, but only by 200 watts. It's only 200 watts shy of its rated power. This is not a bad result whatsoever. Pretty impressive. I'm tempted to do another bench test and push it into a tiny bit more clip and see how much power this thing can do. If you were doing a test, if you were doing a sort of competition test, you know, where you're playing tones, you always run into a bit of clip because it gives you more power and gets you louder. You don't want to do it daily, but you know, that's how you get numbers. So let's push this into a tiny bit more clip and see how much power we can really get out of this thing with a relatively sensible sine wave. Okay, there we go. So that's quite, you know, it's not horrifically clipped, but we've definitely got a bit of clipping going on there. So the voltage RMS of that clipped wave there, we can see is 46.76 volts RMS. So if we go back to our page here, so we had 46.76, and that was at 1 ohm again. 2,186. And the voltage drop would have, well, I always forget to check it, the voltage drop would have been more because it's high amplitude. So let me just work out the voltage drop again. $11.79. So if we do 14.4 divided by 11.79 equals 1.2213, square the result 1.4917, times that by 2186.49, which is what power this just made at 11.79, equals, there we go, 3261.7. So, to get it to make its rated power, well, just over its rated power, we do need to push the amplifier into a little bit of clip there. But, to be perfectly honest, to get just under 3K from this amplifier, bearing in mind how cheap these are, is not too sad at all. Now, actually, I wonder if it's rated at 14.8. If we did it for 14.8, let's go back to our lower clip point, which was 2006 watts. So 14.8 divided by 11.83, which is what the voltage we saw, 1.25, square the result, 1.56. If we times that by 206, that actually gives us 3,139. So what 3,140 watts is very, very close to rated power if this was rated at 14.8. So if you've got 14.8 going into your alternator, the alternator giving out 14.8, you'll get almost 3.2k out of this. Anyway, I want to show you the internals of this. Okay, the internals are pretty interesting. So I'm just going to very quickly take this apart. Let's go to my second camera view here. Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to quickly take all the wires out here. Turn the supplies off so the fan stop buzzing. Power. Remote. Dummy loads. 1, 2, 3, 4. Scope. RCAs. Okay, here we go. Now, Flippy Ruby the amplifier, and we can see the internals here. So, for a 3.2k amp, it is not a lot of stuff in here by any means, but it is not terrible either. It's not really, really crappy either. So, if we go to my handheld camera here, I can show you the different parts of the amplifier. This is the power supply section first and foremost. We've got two reasonable sizable transformers. Now actually having the thinner, multiple winds of thinner cable is actually better than having less winds of thicker cable. There's reasons for that, but I won't go into too many details because it's very complicated. Now these Mosfets, the power supply Mosfets, are IRF 3205s, which are very good. These are very good Mosfets. I don't know if these are the ones that came with it because I think this amplifier had been repaired before, but it has pretty good power supply Mosfets inside. The power supply drive circuit is exactly the same as in every other amplifier. All your sundowns, all your digital designs, all your all your stuff that you really like and you really think is, yeah, this is a fucking great amplifier, they all have pretty much the exact same drive circuit. The only exceptions are the likes of JL Audio, Rockford Fosgate, old Phoenix Gold stuff that actually had someone sit there and design a new circuit specifically for that amplifier. But all of this generic Korean stuff all uses the same power supply drive circuit, and we've got a reasonable number of power supply smoothing caps over here. If we go to the output section, again, we have a reasonable number of output smoothing caps, not too bad at all. The output inductors are on the smaller side. We could probably squeeze some more power out of this amplifier if we did improve the output inductors a little bit. Now, the output FETs, we have a shit ton of output FETs. So these are TO220 package FETs, so they are smaller FETs, but there are more of them. So yeah, these are 300 volt, yeah, wait a minute, 25, yeah, these are 300 volt parts. The amplifier actually has 100 volt plus and minus rails with 14.4 volts worth of input voltage into the power supply. So yeah, we've got 100 volts plus minus, which is pretty high rail voltage. The FETs which I have replaced in here are pretty decent FETs. The general build quality is not bad at all. All the inductors are seated down quite well. Nothing's kind of loose on the board. Even the power supply transformers are seated down pretty well. You've got nice thick cables here going from the amplifier's output to the speaker terminal, so that's good as well. The board thickness is quite thick and quite good. The only niggle that I have is that the board does trampoline a little bit. And by that I mean if you push down on the board here, it actually flexes a little bit like a trampoline would do, which puts stress along these legs here. There's no screws screwing the board down to the middle of the heatsink, which it needs really for reliability against vibration damage. Now, the output drive circuit is not new, but it's not horrifically ancient either. It's newer than the Lanzar Opti 7K's drive circuit. This is the similar sort of drive circuit that you'd see in a Hyphonics, the Hyphonics Brutus range and other things like that. Yeah, it's not the worst and it's not the best either. Reliability wise, there are a couple of transistors on here, this one up here and this one here, which are A42 transistors marked up as 1Ds, which run quite hot and they can fail over after a long time, many years of operation, and when they fail they can sometimes take out, or they often do take out the output section, but I've upgraded those slightly to parts that run a little bit cooler, so going forward this amplifier should be pretty good. So yeah, actually the internals are not too bad, especially considering how ridiculously cheap you can pick these amplifiers up for, even brand new. And probably because there is a kind of negative astigmatism floating around about these amplifiers, if someone has one of these and they're looking to sell it on the used market, they're probably not going to ask too much for it at all. I mean, I imagine someone will probably let this go for, in the UK, probably maybe £100, 80 to £120. In the US, maybe like, I think in the US things are cheaper anyway, so probably like $80, $100 tops, maybe maximum, maybe even less depending on the seller. And if you see one of these, then you can bag up a pretty good bargain, because you'll be getting just shy of 3,000 watts RMS, and with a relatively good board layout and circuit design, and the way the audio wave doesn't look too bad either. It's relatively clean. So yeah, quite a surprising result. Lanzar VIBE stuff isn't too bad. I've actually bench tested I think it's the 1500 watt version of this or something like that, and that made rated power as well, or just shy of rated power. So these things actually do make nearish to the number you see on the front, not quite, but nearish, and the build quality is not too bad either. So something to bear in mind if you're looking for a budget style build.